Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty heavy, a really significant and frankly troubling development. We're talking about the terrorist attack in Pahalgam in Indian-administered Kashmir. That happened on April 22nd, 2025.
Yeah, it was just a horrific incident. 26 people lost their lives and more than 20 others were injured.
Absolutely devastating. So our goal today is to kind of move past that initial shock, and really dig into what this attack means. We need to look at the history driving these India-Pakistan tensions, how people are reacting locally and, well, globally too, and what this could all mean for South Asia down the line.
Exactly. It's crucial to understand the layers here. This attack, it happened in the Baizran Valley near Pahalgam. It's a place often called mini Switzerland of India, a beautiful area. But on April 22nd, 5 militants, and reports say they had M4 carbines, AK-47s, pretty serious weaponry. They went after tourists specifically.
And the details are chilling, aren't they? The reports about demanding religious recitations before the killings. It speaks volumes about the ideology.
It really does. And the scale, 26 dead, 25 Indian nationals, 1 Nepalese citizen. It's the deadliest attack on civilians there since 2019. It definitely feels like a worrying escalation.
And the group that claimed it, the Resistance Front, they're considered an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is based in Pakistan, right?
That's the understanding, yes. And their stated reason. Resisting what they call demographic changes in Kashmir. This ties directly back to India revoking Article 370 in 2019.
Okay, so let's pause there. Because like you said, this context is vital. This attack didn't just come out of nowhere, did it?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, Kashmir. It's been the flashpoint between India and Pakistan since partition back in 1947. Decades of conflict. We've seen wars, constant tension, and specific incidents, often linked to militant groups allegedly operating from Pakistan. Think about the Kargil War in '99.
The Mumbai attacks in 2008.
Exactly. And more recently, the Pulwama attack in 2019. That one really pushed things to the edge.
That led to the Indian airstrikes in Balakot, Pakistan, right? We were pretty close to a full-blown conflict then.
Perilously close. And then, that same year, India revoked Article 370. Now, for listeners who might need a refresher, Article 370 gave Jammu and Kashmir special autonomy, its own constitution, legislative powers, apart from core areas like defense, foreign policy.
Right, so stripping that away, India's move was seen very differently in Pakistan.
Very differently. Pakistan viewed it as a unilateral move by India, basically trying to integrate the region fully and potentially alter its Muslim majority demographic. It massively deepened the mistrust.
So when the Resistance Front cites demographic changes as their motive, it connects directly back to that 2019 decision and all the history behind it.
Precisely. It links these historical grievances, especially post-Article 370, right to the violence we just saw.
Okay, so bringing it back to the immediate aftermath of this Pahalgam attack, how did India respond? Prime Minister Modi's reaction was quite swift, wasn't it?
Extremely swift. He was actually on a visit to Saudi Arabia, cut it short immediately, flew back, chaired an emergency meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security. Very decisive actions followed.
And what were those actions? They seemed quite forceful.
They were. Very strong measures. Probably the most talked about one is the suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty.
Wow. Okay, that's huge. Can you remind us what that treaty is?
Sure. It's a critical agreement from 1960. It governs how India and Pakistan share the waters of the Indus River system. It's held for over 6 decades, largely seen as durable despite conflicts. So, suspending it, that's a major, major move.
A massive lever to pull. What else?
Well, they also closed the Wagah-Attari border crossing. That's a really key link for trade, culture, people-to-people contact. Then, expulsion of Pakistani diplomats from India, pulling back India military advisors from Islamabad, and canceling the SAARC visa exemption scheme for Pakistani nationals.
So SAARC, being the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, that visa scheme was meant to make travel easier, right? So canceling it basically halts those people-to-people exchanges.
Exactly. It cuts another tie.
Taken together, these moves, especially suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, it feels like a really strong signal being sent by Prime Minister Modi's government. What do you think the underlying goal is here? I mean, politically, what are they trying to achieve?
Well, the message is clearly one of intense pressure and holding Pakistan accountable, at least in India's view, for the attack. It's about exerting diplomatic, economic, maybe even strategic leverage. Domestically, you could argue it projects strength, decisiveness. It reassures the Indian public that the government is taking firm action against terrorism. Politically, that often plays well, shores up nationalist support.
Right, projecting resolve.
Exactly. And internationally, India is signaling we won't tolerate cross-border attacks, trying to isolate Pakistan. But, and this is the big but, These actions are risky.
How so?
They invite retaliation. They risk kicking off an escalation spiral that could get out of control, especially the Indus Waters Treaty suspension. Pakistan relies heavily on those rivers. Tampering with that, it's incredibly provocative. It touches on existential issues for them.
And Pakistan did react, didn't they? As you'd expect.
Yes, swiftly. They categorically denied any involvement in the Pahalgam Attack, called India's accusations baseless, which is, standard language in these situations. And they hit back with their own measures, suspending visas for Indians, closing their airspace to Indian flights, reducing India's diplomatic staff in Islamabad.
So tit for tat, essentially.
Pretty much. But the key thing was their warning about the Indus Waters Treaty. They stated very clearly any disruption to water flow would be seen as an act of war.
An act of war, that's incredibly strong language, especially given the nuclear context.
It's deeply alarming. It highlights just how high the stakes are, particularly with water security being such a critical issue. When you have two nuclear-armed neighbors using this kind of rhetoric, the international community gets very nervous, very fast.
Understandably. The fear of miscalculation must be huge, a small border clash.
Exactly. Something relatively minor along the line of control could potentially escalate uncontrollably because trust is just non-existent right now and tensions are incredibly high.
Okay, let's shift back to the ground. Inside Kashmir itself, what's happening there in the immediate wake of the attack?
Well, the main focus initially was, of course, the manhunt for the attackers. The army chief flew into Srinagar. The National Investigation Agency, India's federal counterterror body, took charge of the case. They've released sketches of 3 suspects, names like Asif Fauji, Suleiman Shah, Abu Talha, believed to be hiding out in the Pir Panjal Forest Range. So a major security operation is underway.
Insecurity generally has been tightened across the board.
Massively increased, especially with the Amarnath Yatra pilgrimage coming up soon. That's always a high security event, but this year, even more so.
And the impact on the local people, the economy? Pahalgam is a tourist hub.
Devastating. Just devastating for tourism. There were reports of hundreds of tourists, like over 500 from just one state, Maharashtra, leaving immediately. Widespread hotel cancellations.
Yeah, I saw that quote from a hotelier in Pahalgam.
Yeah.
It's something like, our season is over before it even started.
That really sums it up. It's a massive economic blow to a region that relies so heavily on tourism for livelihoods.
It's heartbreaking. What about the local Kashmiri response? How have people there reacted beyond the economic impact?
We've seen expressions of public feeling. Candlelight vigils were held in Srinagar. There have been protests against terrorism across the valley, too, people demanding peace, demanding justice. It shows that many locals reject this violence. They're often caught in the middle, aren't they, between militants and security forces?
Definitely. Now, zooming out again, what about the rest of the world? How's the international community responding to this?
Broadly, it's been condemnation of the attack itself, coupled with serious concern about the India-Pakistan escalation. We saw the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance issue a strong condemnation, pledging support to India. Similar messages came from the U.K., Russia. The UAE specifically called for urgent de-escalation.
And the UN.
The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is monitoring things closely, urging restraint from both sides. Pretty standard, but important diplomatic signaling.
Is there any real talk of maybe diplomatic intervention, getting someone else involved to cool things down?
Well, the need for diplomacy is obvious. People are talking about maybe neutral mediators stepping in, perhaps at the UN or maybe a coalition of countries, U.S., China, Russia, perhaps trying to facilitate some quiet back-channel talks.
But how realistic is that right now?
It's tough, really tough. The level of mistrust between India and Pakistan is just so high. And you also have India's domestic politics to consider.
How so?
Well, situations like this can sometimes fuel anti-Pakistan sentiment, even anti-Muslim rhetoric domestically. That can make it politically difficult for any Indian government to be seen as making concessions or even engaging too readily in dialogue. It complicates the diplomacy significantly.
Right. So, looking ahead then, what does this all mean for the region? This attack seems to have really ripped the lid off again, showing how fragile things are.
It absolutely has. It's a stark reminder of just how volatile the India-Pakistan relationship remains and how Kashmir is still this unresolved, incredibly dangerous issue. India's strong response, while maybe understandable from their perspective, definitely carries that risk of escalation we talked about that could easily backfire.
And the Indus Waters Treaty suspension, the long-term impact of that, if it holds.
Potentially huge. We're talking about water security in a region already facing scarcity. It could poison relations for decades, quite literally. And of course, the immediate impact on Kashmir's economy and just the psychological well-being of the people there. It's immense.
So lots of international pressure to avoid a wider war, but
But the lack of trust is the killer, really. It
Yeah.
makes genuine de-escalation incredibly difficult, which leaves us with, the big question.
yeah.
Will India and Pakistan manage to step back from this edge? Or is this Pahalgam attack the start of another major crisis between these two nuclear powers? We just don't know yet.
A deeply worrying question to end on. It's clear the fallout from the Pahalgam attack shows just how quickly things can escalate in South Asia, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Thanks for walking us through all the complexities today. And for you, our listeners, perhaps something to think about is the longer arc. How do recurring events like this shape the very possibility of future peace in the region? And what role can or should outside actors really play when trust is so broken? We hope this deep dive gave you some valuable context for a situation that's still very much unfolding.